We're going to get to a return to the spotlight now for Camille Cosby, speaking out in her first major interview in 6 years, hours after the Pennsylvania Supreme Court agreed to hear part of her husband Bill Cosby's appeal. Lindsay Davis spoke with her. Good morning, Lindsay.
Good morning, George. Camille Cosby says she is very pleased with the court's decision. And in addition to speaking out as a fierce defender of her husband of more than 55 years, she also spoke out as a longtime activist, somebody who started fighting for equality, marching back 60 years ago. And she says the same racism that killed George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery in 2020 also fueled the murder of her own son, Ennis, 23 years ago. Camille Cosby breaking her silence in her first major media interview in 6 years, responding to Tuesday's announcement from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, the court agreeing to hear two arguments in her husband Bill Cosby's appeal to overturn his 2018 sexual assault conviction.
Finally, there is a court, the state's highest court, that has said, wait a minute, there are some problems here.
And how is your husband doing? How often do you all communicate? And have you gone to visit him?
We communicate every single day. My husband is doing very well. He is exercising. He is eating properly. I'm happy about that. And in terms of visiting him, no. I do not want to see my husband in that kind of an environment, and he doesn't want me to see him in that kind of an environment.
As for the overall environment in the country right now, the so-called racial reckoning, Mrs. Cosby was just a teen in 1960 when she participated in her first march, railing against inequality as an active participant in the civil rights movement. She says she believes racism is also at the root of her husband's incarceration and claims the women who testified at Cosby's criminal trial presented no proof despite his conviction. In raising your voice to speak out on behalf of Black Lives Matter, are you concerned at all about the blowback from the Me Too movement and those who have been critical of you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't care what they feel. The Me Too movement and movements like them have intentional ignorance pertaining to the history of particular white women who have, from the very beginning, accused black males of sexual assault without any proof whatsoever. No proof anywhere on the face of the earth.
And Tuesday's ruling means that Cosby can appeal based on two factors. One, the judge's decision to allow the 5 other accusers to testify in this particular case, and also the use of Cosby's deposition following an agreement that had been made with a prior district attorney who said essentially that he would grant Cosby immunity, that he would never be charged in that county. Cecilia.
David's on the story from the very beginning for us. Okay, thank you.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to another edition of GavinRichardEsq here on YouTube. On my channel, GBoot2786. Whoever you are, wherever you are, I hope you are blessed and doing safe today. Guys, let's just get into it. You saw the video that was on there. That was from ABC News. Mrs. Bill Cosby, Dr. Camille Cosby, did an interview with Lindsay Davis, I believe, the sister that you saw on ABC, where she was talking on Good Morning America, where she was talking about the appeal that was granted for Dr. Bill Cosby in his 2018 conviction on indecent sexual assault. Now, of course, you saw earlier, and you saw George Stephanopoulos, who was doing who's the host of Good Morning America, and I can't fucking stand him. You know, George Stephanopoulos, if you remember a couple years ago when even the two spokespeople for Bill Cosby, Andrew Wyatt, and I believe her name is Ebony. She's not there anymore, but Ebony Williams, if I'm not mistaken, is her name. They were talking, and George Stephanopoulos was, or Shittanopoulos, I should say, was completely rude. Yeah, that's right. You know, Dr. Randy Short, you know, he told me, we don't call anybody by their real name when they disrespect us. So George Shittanopoulos, he definitely was disrespectful to Bill Cosby and his team when they were trying to speak, not letting them finish when they were actually making these comparisons. And a lot of us have been waiting for a few years for Mrs. Cosby to say something, me included, I won't lie. And I wish that Mrs. Cosby was even more vocal when this stuff was going on beforehand. I know she released statements. I do think it was a mistake. I'll just say this. when she made that statement in front of released that statement in front of the courthouse back in 2017 in the first trial, and even in 2018 when she filed a complaint against Kevin Steele. Although William O'Neill, the judge in the Bill Cosby case, who that fraudulent conviction, and I can't stand, and that corrupt judge, because he certainly allowed things that should not have taken place in that court proceeding. You know, the allowance of 5 prior bad act witnesses, one of whom had a warrant for her arrest. That's right, you guys didn't know stuff like that, but you'll find out soon enough, I think, in the future, of what's going to happen, what's going to be released. And I think now the good thing about this is that people are starting to scratch their heads, because we've been sounding the alarm for the last 4 or 5 years about this Me Too movement. You know, we've been talking about how they're trying to change the definition of rape, how now in different states they have actually increased the statute of limitations, like in New York. I believe it's up until, at one point, it may have been a year from the wrongful act that it occurred. Now you have till you're the age of 55, if I'm not mistaken, if you're a child abuse victim, to bring an accusation. That means you can bring that even in a civil suit, even if that person is dead, because they tried to do that shit to Rick James. But I don't think that even went anywhere, because number one, Rick James is dead. But the other thing too is that you can't slander. There's no such thing as defamation of the dead, because defamation is a personal right. When you're talking about assassinating your character, you have to make the allegation that your character was assassinated. So how can the dead do that? How can Michael Jackson file a lawsuit against Wade Robinson and James Safechuck and Dan Reed and HBO over that horrible docuseries Leaving Neverland? You know, I wish that Mrs. Cosby, you know, again, could have been even more vocal, like what Tavis Smiley, and even Bill Cosby, like what Tavis Smiley did when those accusations came out against him. And I know that a problem that Bill Cosby had was that he was dealing with multiple lawsuits from different women, and a good number of those lawsuits got dismissed because they were either outside the statute of limitations or none of it made sense. Chloe Going's story did not make sense. You know, Janice Dickinson's story did not make sense, although that one is still pending. Same thing with Lily Bernard. She's changed it, that black woman, that they, well, she's not even black from my understanding. She's Afro-Cubano. But from what Tariq Nasheed was describing. But, I mean, she comes out, and her story didn't even make sense. We've been telling you guys this, but you just want to believe the numbers. And I watched the Daily News, the Daily Mail, where they had that, I don't know who that heifer was, but that white woman who, if you guys know the clip that I'm talking about, they were talking about the appeal. And she was trying to say, well, yes, we know that people of color, there's a high concentration of them in jail, but here, you know, we have evidence. There was evidence that supported that. And she was trying to get the brother to amen, but the brother was like, well, I hope it goes to trial so we can at least put aside the fact that racial prejudice didn't have a part in it, since it's going to an appeal. But the thing about it is, what evidence were you looking at? Because there was no evidence. There was no physical evidence in this case. No rape kit, no DNA kit, no police reports either. Like, somebody can just say something and you guys want to run with it like it's the gospel. How could you believe what Janice Dickinson says, and Janice Dickinson gets on the witness stand and admits that she lied? And I could go on and on about this. I don't want to do that, because the videos that I've done, the interviews that I've done over the last 4 years, you guys can see it for yourselves. I've had it up here. You know, you check out the interview I did with Tom Mesereau. Check out the interview I did with Scott Ross a few weeks ago. Scott was gracious enough to come on the show and talk about Cosby. For over an hour and 40 minutes, we talked about different stuff as well, but that case included. Tom Mesereau was the same way. I can always bring them back on the show if I wanted to. No, Camille Cosby was 1,000% right. We got to straighten up our acts. Me Too movement's got to straighten up its act. Really, in all honesty, there shouldn't be. And I know I might catch flack for this, but the Me Too movement should have no place in the justice system. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying that you can't support victims. I'm not saying that women can't come forward. Absolutely, they need to come forward, but they need to come forward immediately. There needs to be counseling for them. I'm 100% behind rape victims. I want that to be clear, but I do not like lynch mobs. And what we're fighting for, I have my issues with Black Lives Matter. The only thing I do agree with them is about combating police brutality. But when you see people out there protesting, when you see people out there frustrating, when you see people out there rioting, they're upset because they witness a murder that is caught on television and is circulated throughout the internet, and yet no arrests had been made until a week later. And we all know that if that was a civilian that had done that, there would have been no question that they would have been arrested immediately at the scene of the crime. There would not have been a need to have a Black Lives Matter or a rally out in Brunswick, Georgia, if the Brunswick County District Attorney, Miss Johnson, had done her job. The same way the Wayward County District Attorney could have done his job, who took the case on after Miss Johnson refused to take on that case. If they had just done their jobs, we wouldn't be here. When Ahmaud Arbery got killed, when that video was circulating, had the sheriff's office in Brunswick County done their job and immediately arrest those three men, William Roddy Bryan and Travis McMichael and Gregory McMichael, we wouldn't be here. I doubt if COVID-19 would be spreading like the way it is. And they're saying, well, it's because of masks and not the protest. I've heard different things. No, I don't believe that shit. I think the protest is a part of it because you're not social distancing. How can you social distance when you're at a rally and you got people, you're walking with people right next to you and in front of you? I'm going to actually upload a clip that I did. I'm about 4 weeks late with this. I've just been tied up, but I'm going to show you a clip also of a rally that I was at where we were talking about different stuff. That's the next video. But Camille Cosby, a long time overdue sister, but thank you for speaking out on this one. I stand with her. She's 1,000% right. And another thing that she did in that interview, she talked about how racism killed her son, Enos Cosby. Now, you guys know I've talked about the murder of Enos Cosby before. A few weeks ago, check out the interview I did with Nicole. We discussed the circumstances around his death. But, Enos Cosby was murdered by that Russian immigrant. And I do remember Mrs. Cosby writing an op-ed about how racism killed her son because this man was a white supremacist. And she talked about that in this interview. Now, the video clip you saw earlier was about a shortened version of it. It was it was a 3-minute, 20-second clip, 26-second clip that you saw. And I think her interview was around 11 or 12 minutes, around that time. But she went in depth talking about the racial prejudice that killed her son because this Russian immigrant who knew nothing about black culture, but only what he was told and what he saw from white extremists and obviously the stereotypes that you saw on television and in the news media. He saw that and that made him want to kill Enos Cosby in point blank range. And she even said it wasn't a robbery. I've always speculated that Enos Cosby, this is my personal opinion. I always thought it was a hit, personally. Of course, there's nothing strong that suggests no evidence other than circumstantial evidence, however, that supports that, but nothing direct. But Yeah, Mrs. Cosby, I think she's gotten frustrated with it, or she's been frustrated with it. Probably the reason she hasn't been as vocal is because, there's a pending lawsuit, and she even talked about why she didn't want to get too much into the case, because obviously there's a legal battle that's going on. But that appeal, as I've told people who've been following the Bill Cosby case, those that believe Bill Cosby is innocent, this is a very big deal, because in order for the Supreme Court to make that decision, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, there had to have been something that caught their eye that they didn't like, or at least piqued their interest. Either way, and hopefully Bill Cosby's attorneys, his appellate attorneys, they got to go hard. It's all or nothing. Anyway, guys, that's it for me. This has been the latest video of Gavin Richard Presents, only on G-Boot 2786. Whoever you are, wherever you are, hope you're blessed this evening, this weekend. I'll holler at you later. Please subscribe to the channel and share this, like it, and donate if you please. The links are going to be available after this clip. Thank you.